What happens to the body? What happens to the body in the final 72 hours of life? Most people have no idea what's actually happening in the final 3 days of a person's life. Not in a spiritual sense, in a biological one. The body follows a very specific sequence. It's been documented thousands of times. Palliative care nurses recognize the stages. Hospice doctors can often predict the timeline within hours, but nobody tells families this before it happens. So here's what's actually happening. 72 hours out, the body begins to withdraw resources from the extremities and redirect them toward the vital organs. This is called peripheral shutdown. Blood pressure drops, circulation slows. The hands and feet begin to cool and sometimes turn a mottled blue-purple color, like a bruise pattern under the skin. This is called livedo reticularis. It looks alarming. It isn't a sign of pain. It's the vascular system consolidating. At the same time, the kidneys begin to reduce output. Urine becomes darker, more concentrated, and eventually stops almost entirely. The body's no longer processing waste the way it was. It doesn't need to. It's conserving. The person becomes harder to rouse. They sleep for long stretches. When they do wake, they may be confused, unsure of where they are, who is present, what time it is. This isn't pain. This is the brain beginning to detach from the sensory environment it's been managing for decades. There's a specific phenomenon that hospice workers notice almost universally. The dying person often speaks to people who aren't there. A parent, a sibling who died years earlier, a childhood friend. Medical literature calls this terminal lucidity, or nearing death awareness. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but it happens often enough that it's considered a marker, a sign that the 72-hour window has begun. 48 hours out, breathing changes. This is the stage most families find hardest to watch. The pattern is called Cheney-Stokes respiration. The person breathes in irregular cycles, several shallow breaths, then a pause, sometimes 10 to 60 seconds, with no breathing at all, then a deep breath and the cycle restarts. The pause is terrifying if you don't know it's coming. Every silence feels like the last one. But Cheney-Stokes is not distress. It's the brainstem, the most primitive part of the brain, the part that controls automatic breathing, responding to falling carbon dioxide levels. The respiratory drive is destabilizing, not shutting off instantly. It winds down in cycles. The jaw also relaxes. The mouth opens. The throat tissues relax enough that air passing through creates a loud, rattling sound on the exhale. This is called the death rattle. It became famous enough that the phrase entered common language. It sounds distressing. Hospice nurses are trained to tell families clearly, the person making that sound cannot hear it the way you do. Their consciousness is no longer registering it as distressing. The sound is produced by relaxed tissue, not struggling tissue. Feeding stops completely. The body no longer accepts food or water. Families often want to force fluids. Hospice workers consistently advise against it. The body at this stage cannot process fluids. Forcing them can cause fluid buildup in the lungs and create the very distress the family is trying to prevent. The eyes may partially open, but stop tracking. The gaze becomes unfocused. The brain is no longer directing the eyes towards stimuli. It's running on residual function. 24 hours out, circulation has pulled almost entirely to the core. The skin cools further. On light skin, it may appear waxy or yellowish. The nose and ears become markedly cold. The feet and lower legs turn a deep blue-gray. Blood pressure is too low to measure accurately with standard equipment. The person is no longer responsive in any consistent way. Reflex is slow. The blink reflex fades. The swallow reflex is gone. But hearing is documented as the last sense to go. Multiple studies, including neurological recordings from dying patients, show auditory processing persisting after all other conscious function has ceased. Palliative care guidelines in most countries specifically tell families, speak to them.
With you. I love you. Keep listening, I'm right here.
They may be hearing you until the very end. This has been confirmed often enough that it's now standard guidance. Not anecdote. The final moments. Breathing slows to one breath every 30 seconds. then 1 per minute. Then a final exhale, sometimes longer, sometimes quieter than expected. And no inhale follows. The heart beats for seconds to a few minutes more after breathing stops. Then it stops too. The brain, cut off from oxygen, loses function in layers. Consciousness, if it was still present in any form, ends within seconds of circulation stopping. The deeper structures take minutes. Some electrical activity in the brainstem can persist for up to 10 minutes after cardiac arrest. But the person, the awareness, the identity, is gone before that. Most people who witness a death in hospice describe the same thing afterward. Not horror, not the thing they feared, something quieter than they expected. The biological reality of dying, when not disrupted by emergency intervention, when allowed to follow its natural sequence, is measurably less violent than most people imagine. The body knows what it's doing. It's been doing this for as long as life has existed. What nobody tells you is that the hardest part isn't watching someone die. It's not knowing what you're watching. Now you know.